Breaking news: a free Russia will remain just that. A dream. A new Russia has long been a pipe dream for Russia's political exiles and dissidents. Will the hopes and dreams of the present day also go unrealized? Numerous Russian opposition figures, both real and imagined, populate European and American capitals, and they mostly promote the idea of a post-Putin free country. They are just the most recent in a long line of Russians who have fled the country and who have perished in exile year after year, never to see the promised rebirth of their homeland. In the last 100 years, there have been 5 distinct waves of people leading the nation. In the first, known as the White Immigration, which occurred between 1917 and 1920, members of the aristocracy, intellectuals, and white anti-Bolshevik movement fled the country following the defeat of the Bolsheviks in the Civil War. The countesses became, at most, housekeepers in Paris, while the Russian earls became cab drivers. Rarely did anyone live to witness the collapse of communism. Prisoners of war and others who refused to face the grim fate in Stalin's Russia made up the majority of the second wave in the 1940s. Both factions were seen as betraying the Soviet Union. The third group encompassed the years 1960 to 1990 and included anti-Semitism, cultural figures and intellectuals who opposed the Soviet regime, and Jewish people. Notable figures from this school of thought included Nureyev, Solzhenitsyn, Dovlatov, and Brodsky. After 1991, many Russians realized that although their country was liberated from communism, it remained trapped in its own history. Some lived through the fall of the Soviet Union, while others went back. Reasons for the fourth wave of immigration, which occurred from the 1990s to the 2000s, included economic hardship, the desire to reunite with ancestors who had immigrated before, and the hope of discovering a better life somewhere else. At least it was determined that liberalization in Russia would not alter the country's character. Another huge exodus occurred when Stalin-style political repression and the fear of death on the battlefield, coupled with the restoration of repressive mechanisms following the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, occurred less than 30 years after the fall of the Soviet Union. At that time, some still thought Russia might become the promised land. The crackdown in the early 2020s was characterized by Human Rights Watch as a concerted effort to silence the public. Although the world around us may evolve, Russia remains steadfast. Legends about a nation's illustrious past are common, but they seldom hold up to reality. Persecution and an absence of liberty serve as the bedrock of the Russian Empire and, more specifically, the Soviet Union, according to their respective histories. There has never been a period when good things beat evil, and even Yeltsin's reign was far from democratic. A reasonable interpretation of the present government's policies is that they are a continuation of the KGB's post-communist toolkit for endless enrichment, which includes repression from the Soviet era. American scholar Andrew Wedeman claims that under Putin's regime, near total impunity for those authorized to loot is possible. An analysis of Russia must not be swayed by wishful thinking. Even though there are numerous examples of states losing their democratic status and no nation is born with a predisposition towards particular systems, it is still a nuclear power with immense resources that its elites can plunder, a huge apparatus for repression, strong tendencies toward imperialism and revanchism, a weak civil society, no opposition, and limited democratic experience. It is economically and militarily unbeatable, but it lacks the will and resources to change itself. It is difficult to envision Russia implementing comprehensive reforms, even in return for reduced sanctions. Even if the country's elites are financially motivated to re-establish ties with the West, its security and intelligence agencies have an outsized impact, which is the main reason behind this. Russia is essentially a state-affiliated security agency. After all, the security forces, or Siloviki, make up a large portion of the state and are believed by some to number 5 million strong. Ukrainian National Security and Defense Council Secretary Alexei Danilov has observed that Russian society is becoming increasingly rigid. No changes will occur in Russia as a result of Putin's death. A long time will pass. Above all else, they must begin to love one another. The Ukrainian people have a deep understanding of what is required to establish and maintain a democratic system, having lived through 3 revolutions in their 30-year journey to democracy. Massive mental shifts, institutional reforms, and individual bravery are required. It is absurd to think that Putin's fascist Russia can be transformed into a Western ally that upholds human rights and releases political prisoners in a simple manner. Russia will keep trying to achieve its global power ambitions, even though it is currently unable to do so. The German Council on Foreign Relations has projected that, should Ukraine suffer a defeat, Russia will be prepared to launch an attack on NATO within 6 to 10 years. Russia aspires to become a proud leader of the unfree world in alliance with Iran and China, wishing the new Russian dissident all the best as a Ukrainian who values having neighbors who are civilized and peaceful. However, my fear as a Ukrainian with expertise in the development of democracies is that most will spend their golden years in exile pining for a motherland that never wanted them. We shall find peace, as summed up in Uncle Vanya by Anton Chekhov, and that shouldn't stop them from dreaming. The sky will be adorned with diamonds, and angels will sing to us. It is simply not going to happen anytime soon.